Okay.
Yeah.
I want you to close your eyes for a second, just for a moment. Stop whatever you're doing. If you're driving, obviously keep them open. But mentally, I want you to go somewhere with me.
All right, I'm with you.
Imagine total silence. And I don't mean, the quiet of a library. I mean a heavy, pressurized silence. The kind that feels like it actually has weight to it.
Like the air before a huge storm, that electric feeling.
Exactly. But heavier. And then it starts. But it's not with the sound you hear with your ears. It's something you feel in your skeleton, in your bones.
It's a vibration.
A vibration. It's super low frequency, maybe 20 hertz or something. It travels up through the soles of your shoes. It completely bypasses your eardrums, and it just rattles your teeth right in your skull. It is the sound of the Earth's deep bones beginning to grind against each other.
Wow. That is a pretty terrifying way to start a conversation.
Well, it gets worse. Because that low rumble, it starts to shift. It pitches up. It transforms into a roar. The source material we have today, this whole stack of papers here on the desk, it actually describes the sound as a thunderous tongue.
A thunderous tongue.
It's the voice of a tsunami. And then after you feel it, after you hear it, the visual hits you. The ocean, which has been this, this source of life and calm your whole life, suddenly just pulls back, stands up on its hind legs, and becomes a literal wall of water.
The sheer physical dominance of nature. It's humbling, to say the least.
It's overwhelming. It's visceral. And that is where we have to start today. We aren't starting this deep dive with theology. We're not starting with philosophy or, some abstract equations on a whiteboard. We are starting with the wet, shaking, terrifying reality of the ground crumbling beneath the city. We are starting right there with the empiricist's perspective. Because when you witness a tragedy of that magnitude, when you see the devastation on the news, or God forbid you see it in person, it provokes a reaction that isn't intellectual. It's primal.
It forces the question. The question that humanity has probably been screaming at the sky since we lived in caves.
Right. And the source we are deep diving into today, it's a book called Divine Design and the Crucible of Natural Suffering by an author named J.R. Ahmed. It identifies this very specific reaction. It gives it a name. It calls it the atheist's cry.
The atheist's cry.
But here's the thing that really caught me when I was reading this. It doesn't describe this cry as an argument. It's not a debate point you use to score on a forum, right? It's described as a piercing, poignant plea. It is the raw human cry that just screams, where is your God in this?
Which is the ultimate question, isn't it? I mean, if there is a God, where was he when that wave hit?
That is the core conflict. That's the mission for today. We are looking at the clash between that visceral reality of suffering, the blood, the rubble, all of it, and this claim of a sovereign intelligence that's supposedly governing the universe. We are conducting, for lack of a better term, a cosmic audit.
I like that framing. An audit. It implies we're looking at the books. We're checking the math. We're seeing if it all adds up.
We are checking the math on God. We have these excerpts from Ahmed's work, and we're going to use them to navigate that huge gap between the pain we feel in our gut and the divine wisdom that the rationalists claim exists.
It is a heavy lift. I mean, we're going to have to talk about earthquakes, about predation, animals eating each other, the suffering of children, all the hardest questions.
Yeah.
And we have to ask, is this a bug in the code? Is the system just fundamentally broken? Or is it the system working exactly as it was designed?
So let's open the file. We have to start with the prosecution. If this is a court case, I'm the prosecutor, and I'm bringing the case against Providence. The source material, it lays out what it calls the indiscriminate nature of destruction. And honestly, reading through these notes, it is a brutal list. It is hard to get through.
It's the empiricist's indictment. And usually when you study philosophy of religion, this always centers on what they call the trilemma.
The trilemma. Okay, let's unpack that, because it sounds like a geometry problem, but it's actually more like a logic trap, isn't it?
It is a perfect logic trap.
Yeah.
It confronts the three attributes that are traditionally assigned to the creator in most monotheistic traditions.
Right, the big three.
Omnibenevolence, which just means all good, omnipotence, all powerful, and omniscience, all knowing. The argument, and it is a very, very strong logical argument, is that you simply cannot have all three of these coexist with a tsunami that wipes out a kindergarten. It's logically impossible.
It's the three-legged stool that just falls over if you kick one of the legs out. So let's break them down like the source does. First, omnibenevolence. If the deity is truly all good, then kindness should be the default setting, right?
Theoretically, yes. Benevolence should just flow like water from a spring. Effortlessly.
But the text asks this really haunting question. Why suffering's searing glow? Such a poetic, awful phrase. If you have the capacity to be kind and you are supposedly infinite kindness, why is there so much searing glow? It just doesn't track. I mean, look, if I see a kid falling off a bike, I help them up. I'm not infinitely good, I'm just a regular person. So why doesn't the infinite good do the same on a cosmic scale?
It's the problem of inaction, which leads you directly to the second leg of the stool. Omnipotence. This is usually where the anger is directed, I think.
Oh, for sure.
If God is all-powerful, he has the mechanism to stop the pain. The ability is there. It's not a question of capability.
The source uses this incredible phrase, a whisper. It says a whisper, swift and strong, could shift the tectonic plates safely. It's not like God would need to lift a heavy weight and, strain a muscle. If he's omnipotent, he could just nudge it. A tiny little cosmic nudge.
A micro-adjustment in the system.
Exactly. Just curb the pathogens, quell the tide, just a little tweak in the code. And the fact this tweak doesn't happen.
Well, in the eyes of the critic, that looks like weakness. Or worse, it looks like negligence. It's like a lifeguard sitting up there in the chair watching someone drown and just refusing to blow the whistle.
It's an indictment of character, not just ability. And then you get to the third one. And to me, this is the one that really, really messes with my head. Omniscience. The all-knowing.
This is where it gets really dark. Because this creates the problem of premeditation.
Right. The source points out that if God is all-knowing, then the cosmic dream, the entire plan for the universe from beginning to end, it included the specific, high-resolution knowledge of children buried in rubble.
It wasn't a surprise.
It wasn't a surprise. It wasn't an accident where God looked down and said, "Whoops, didn't see that plate slipping." It was known. Before the first Adam was even created, that specific moment of terror for that specific child was already on the timeline. It was part of the design.
And that feels monstrous to us. It feels malevolent. And it leads to the next charge in the indictment, the charge of moral arbitrariness. The destruction is indiscriminate. That's a key word in our source material. Indiscriminate.
The earthquake doesn't perform a background check. It doesn't pull up a file and say, okay, this person is a saint, they donate to charity, they call their mom every Sunday, let's skip this house. This person over here is a sinner, they kick puppies, let's shake this foundation.
No, it strikes saints and sinners alike. And the source gives these vivid, terrible examples. Hospitals full of infants, impoverished communities built on floodplains, not by choice, but by necessity. The people who are least equipped to handle the disaster are so often the ones hit the hardest.
And this is where the critic, the prosecutor, in our analogy just completely rejects the standard religious defenses. You know, the ones we always hear.
Oh yeah, God works in mysterious ways. That's the classic.
Exactly, that one. And the source material, it highlights the atheist critique of this mysterious plan. They argue that calling it God's plan is nothing more than a post hoc solace.
Post hoc solace, that's some fancy talk.
It's fancy talk for making ourselves feel better after the bad thing has already happened.
Precisely. It's a rationalization we invent to numb the pain. It's a way to avoid looking at the abyss, and it completely trivializes the agony of the victim to say, don't worry, your unimaginable suffering is just part of a mystery.
It's like putting a tiny bandage on a massive gunshot wound and calling it healing. And the source points out something else, the silence. For me, this is maybe the most damning part. When the disaster hits, when the dust is choking the air and people are screaming, who is digging in the rubble?
Human beings.
Right. Human hands, charity workers, neighbors helping neighbors. The source says the divine hand seems silent in the storm. The only help that actually shows up is us. So the empiricist looks at all of this, the randomness, the cruelty, the premeditation, the silence, and says the system is broken, or the supervisor is absent, or the supervisor is a monster.
It is an incredibly powerful argument, and I want to validate that. It resonates because it is based on our deepest empathy. It is based on our shared human experience of pain. We feel it in our gut. It's not just an intellectual puzzle.
So, is there a defense? Because right now, the prosecution's case is looking pretty good. It feels almost airtight.
There is a defense. But to hear it, we have to shift our mode of thinking completely. We have to move from the visceral, from that gut feeling of pain, to the structural. We have to actually perform the audit you talked about.
Okay, so we've heard the prosecution, now we hear the defense, the rationalists' rebuttal. Where do we even begin?
I want you to imagine zooming out, way, way out. We are leaving the ground level. We're leaving that specific tragic pixel of the disaster, and we're looking at the entire picture of the cosmos. We have to put on the lens of the rationalist. And the source material pivots here to the Quranic worldview, specifically to this concept of Qadar.
Qadar. Okay, I've heard that word before. Usually people translate it as predestination, right? Or fate, like it was written, that kind of thing.
Often, yes, that's the common translation. But in this specific context, and especially in the source text by J.R. Ahmed, it is translated as law of proportion.
Law of proportion. Okay, that sounds much more like physics than theology. It sounds mathematical.
That is exactly the point. The entire framework shifts. The source cites a verse from Surah Al-Qamar. We have created all things in due measure and proportion. This reframes the entire discussion. The tectonic shifts, the weather patterns, the behavior of viruses, these aren't chaotic, random acts of a moody deity who woke up on the wrong side of the bed one day.
They're math.
They're math. They're part of a fixed, intricate framework.
But hold on a second. Math can still be cruel. I mean, the equation for an atomic bomb is just math, but the result is horrific. Just because it's calculated doesn't automatically mean it's good.
That's a fair point. So let's look at the mechanism. Let's audit the system. Why do we have earthquakes?
Well, because tectonic plates move around. They grind against each other.
And why do they move? What's driving them?
I assume, from what I remember from school, heat from the center of the Earth.
Correct. The Earth has a molten core, a giant ball of liquid metal. That core generates an immense amount of heat. That heat needs to escape, so it creates these huge convection currents in the mantle, which is the layer above it, and that's what pushes the plates around on the surface. Now, here's the crucial question. Why do we need a molten core? What's it doing for us?
I'm not a geologist, but I know it has something to do with the magnetic field.
Exactly. The churning of that molten iron core acts like a giant dynamo. It generates the magnetosphere, that huge invisible magnetic bubble that surrounds the Earth. Do you know what happens if that core cools down and stops churning?
The magnetic field dies.
The magnetic field dies, and then the solar wind, this constant stream of charged particles from the sun, would just strip away our atmosphere like paint from a wall.
And the oceans.
They boil off into space. We become Mars, a dead red frozen rock.
So you're saying the earthquake is the necessary side effect of the very engine that keeps our planet alive?
I'm saying it's not even a side effect. It is the cost of doing business in a life-sustaining universe. The source argues that these events are operating under strict laws of necessity. If you want a planet that can sustain life, you need an atmosphere. If you want an atmosphere, you need a magnetic field. If you want a magnetic field, you need a molten core. If you have a molten core, you get moving plates. And if you have moving plates, you are going to have earthquakes, period.
So the whisper I mentioned earlier, the whole idea that God could just nudge the plate and stop the quake.
Think about what that actually implies on a physical level. If God intervenes to stop that plate from moving, he is suspending the laws of thermodynamics. He is stopping the transfer of heat from the core to the surface.
He's breaking the laws of physics.
And if he breaks the laws of physics every single time something uncomfortable is about to happen, do we even live in a universe with laws anymore?
No, we live in a universe of pure magic. Anything could happen at any time, for no reason.
And in a universe of magic, science is impossible. You cannot study a world where the rules change every Tuesday because God wants to save a particular building. The source brings up another concept here, tafawut.
Tafawut. Okay, that's a new one for me. Unpack that.
It translates roughly to inconsistency, or cracks, or breaks. The source cites a verse from Surah Al-Mulk, where it challenges the observer directly. It says, "You do not see in the creation of the most merciful any inconsistency." It then says, to look at the sky, do you see any cracks? Do you see any breaks in the laws of physics?
It's basically saying, go ahead, check the code. It's bug-free. Find a flaw.
Precisely. If gravity worked 99% of the time, but then just decided to take a day off, we'd all be flung into space. If the strong nuclear force that holds the nuclei of atoms together just flickered for a nanosecond, the entire universe would dissolve into a cloud of particles.
So the stability of the universe, the very thing that allows us to exist and even have this conversation, is dependent on these laws being absolute and unbreakable.
Yes. And here's the paradox. The disaster is actually proof that the system is functioning perfectly. The tectonic plate moved because the laws of physics are reliable. There are no breaks in the creation.
So it's a package deal. You buy the car, you get the engine noise, you want a living planet, you get the tectonic shifts.
The sovereign intelligence, in this view, has created an intricate system of cause and effect. It is a machine of immense precision. And the source argues that calling it evil is a failure of perspective. It's like we're staring at a cracked windshield from a minor fender bender, while God is looking at the overall structural integrity of the vehicle's chassis.
Okay, I can follow the logic on the rocks. I can get my head around that. Tectonic plates don't have feelings. They don't scream. But let's pivot, because there is a part of this source material that really stopped me cold. It's not about rocks. It's about flesh and blood. It's what the source calls the problem of the fawn.
Ah, yes, the question of animal suffering. This is where the logic gets much harder and the emotions get much louder.
This just feels different. Because with humans, you can at least try to argue free will. You can argue sin. You can say, oh, we built the building wrong. But a fawn, a baby deer, the source uses this brutal image of a fawn struggling in a lion's maw, being eaten alive.
It is a brutal image. Staccato violence. It's meant to be jarring.
It is. And the argument here is so simple and so powerful. The fawn didn't do anything wrong. It's not a sinner. It's not learning some moral lesson for the afterlife. It's just pain. It is pure, unadulterated, pain unmerited. How in the world do you fit that into a merciful design?
This is where the debate gets very sharp, very pointed. The source calls this the problem of natural evil in a non-human context. And the rationalist's rebuttal here relies on us checking our own anthropomorphism.
Anthropomorphism. Okay, so that's when we project human traits onto non-humans. Like when I think my dog looks guilty after he eats the trash, when really he's just a dog reacting to my tone.
Exactly. We look at the fawn and we see Bambi. We see a little human child in a fur coat. We project our entire moral framework, our ideas of murder and innocence and victimhood, onto a purely biological interaction. But the source introduces the Quranic concept of It means communities.
Communities like you. I remember seeing that phrase in the notes.
Yes. The text says that animals are communities like you, but, and this is the key, they are communities defined by instinct, not by moral choice. And here's the really controversial part for a modern listener. The source argues that the lion is being obedient to God by killing the fawn.
Whoa, whoa, whoa. Hold on. Obedient by ripping another living creature apart. That sounds twisted.
The views of the source is qanitan.
Qanitan.
It means devoutly obedient. Usually you would use that word to describe a monk praying in the middle of the night, but the source applies it to the predator. The lion is designed to hunt. That is its biological function, its code. When it hunts, it is fulfilling the command of its creator. It is submitting to its design. It's not murder. It's a form of worship.
Worship? That feels like a huge stretch. I mean, come on.
In the sense of fulfilling its created purpose, yes. The lion cannot choose to be vegan. It can't have a moral debate with itself about the ethics of eating meat. It is obeying the immutable laws of its own biology.
Okay, fine. Let's grant that. The lion is a biological robot following a program. But for the fawn, it's still agony. It's still suffering. So why design a system that requires that much blood? Why is the program written in red ink?
This brings us to the next concept, which is Mizan. The balance.
The balance, okay.
The source reframes this individual act of violence as mercy on a macro-ecological scale.
Okay, you're going to have to walk me through that one very slowly. How is being eaten alive mercy?
Think about the alternative. Let's just run a simulation in our heads. What happens if you remove the predator? What happens if you wave a magic wand and all the lions and wolves and predators just vanish from an ecosystem?
Well, the deer are probably pretty happy for a little while.
For a little while. And then
the population grows. A lot.
It explodes. It grows exponentially. And then what happens?
They eat all the grass, all the plants.
They strip the forest floor bare. They eat the saplings so no new trees can grow. The soil starts to erode. The water quality in the rivers drops. And then what happens to the deer?
They starve to death.
Mass starvation. And disease. Disease spreads like wildfire through an overcrowded, malnourished herd. And it is a slow, lingering, agonizing death for thousands of animals, rather than a quick, violent death for one.
You're saying the lion is divine pest control.
I'm saying the lion is a regulator, a keystone. The hard truth that the source presents is that the predator is a tool of mercy for the ecosystem. It prevents the slow, agonizing collapse of the entire structure. The quick death of the individual preserves the life of the collective.
So it's ecological mercy. It's a mercy for the whole forest, but not for the one deer.
Exactly. We as humans focus on the pixel, the individual fawn dying. Our empathy makes us zoom in on the tear in his eye. The divine perspective, the source argues, is focused on the picture, the health and sustainability of life itself.
That is a cold calculus, though. It's like, sorry, little guy, you have to die so the grass can stay green and the river can run clean. It's hard to feel good about that.
It is objective. It's not about feeling good. The source challenges us directly on what it calls the limitation of empathy. It quotes a verse from Surah Al-Baqarah. Perhaps you hate a thing and it is good for you. Our agony at watching the Fawn is a localized emotional reaction. We're programmed to hate the sight of blood and suffering. But the divine perspective, according to this argument, must prioritize the sustainability of the entire system over the emotional comfort of the individual moment.
It's seeing the forest, literally, instead of just the one tree or the one deer.
But that, of course, leads us to the even bigger question, the one that usually comes up at 2 o'clock in the morning when you can't sleep.
Which is?
If God is so brilliant that he's capable of designing such a complex, self-regulating ecosystem, why not just design a system where the deer doesn't need to be eaten in the first place? Why not just make a world without hunger? Why not just build paradise from the start?
Yes, exactly. That's the ultimate question. If you're the architect and you can build literally anything you can imagine, why build a gladiator arena? Why not just build a peaceful lounge?
And that's section 4 in our outline, the Crucible. The source material addresses this with one of the divine names, Al-Hakim the Wise. And it offers a really fascinating definition of what this world, what the Dunya, actually is.
We usually hear that it's a test, right? That's the common answer.
Yes, but we usually interpret test like it's a written exam in school. You sit quietly at a desk, you check some boxes, you turn it in, and you wait for a grade. It's passive. The source argues it's not that kind of test at all. It's a real-time functional stress test.
A stress test, okay, like for a heart, when they put you on a treadmill.
What?
Or for a bridge where they drive heavy trucks onto it just to see if it snaps.
Think of a gymnasium or dojo, a place of resistance. The source uses this muscle analogy. Can you grow a muscle without resistance?
No. Biologically impossible. You have to literally tear the muscle fibers on a micro level. You need gravity, you need to lift a weight, you need to struggle against something that pushes back.
Okay. Can you develop the virtue of courage without the existence of danger?
No. If there's no danger, courage is just a word in a dictionary. It doesn't actually exist as a quality. You're just pleasant. You're not brave.
Can you have science, medical science, engineering, architecture, without the challenge of overcoming nature, without problems to solve?
I see exactly where you're going with this. If there were no earthquakes, we wouldn't need structural engineering. If there were no diseases, we wouldn't need medicine or biology. We wouldn't need to learn anything.
Exactly. The source implies that a world without suffering, without challenges, will be a world of total stagnation. It calls it the law of entropies and growth. Without an external force, a system tends towards disorder and decay. Without struggle, a character does the same.
So, if we lived in some kind of cosmic padded room where nothing could ever hurt us, where the temperature was always a perfect 72 degrees and food just appeared in our mouths, we wouldn't actually be human.
We would be stagnant biological entities. We'd be well-fed cattle. We wouldn't need to think or care or build or innovate or love. The test, as it's mentioned in Surah Al-Mulk, is who is best indeed. Not who is most comfortable, but who is best in action. That is an active, present tense evaluation. It's about becoming something. And you cannot become best indeed in a frictionless vacuum.
The source also had this really interesting phrase, adornment as interface. What's that about?
Yes. The material world, with all its beauty and all its danger, is an adornment. It's an interface designed to test human discernment. We are placed in this environment that is breathtakingly beautiful, the sunset, the ocean, the mountains, but it's also incredibly dangerous. The storm, the virus, the predator. The test is, do we just consume it? Do we complain about it? Or do we learn from it and manage it?
It shifts the responsibility, doesn't it? Instead of just looking up at the sky and asking, why did God do this to us? It forces the question back down to us. Given this reality, what are you going to do about it?
Which brings us directly to the human variable. Because we could talk about lions and tectonic plates all day, and that's fine for a philosophy seminar. But when a concrete building collapses on a family, that feels different. That feels personal. That feels like something went wrong.
It does. And this is section 5, the human variable and collective accountability. I have to ask the hard question here. If this world is a stress test, the cost seems way too high. Innocent people die. Is the source saying that the victims of the earthquake are being directly punished for their sins?
This is a critical distinction, and this source is very careful here. It cites the verse. Whatever strikes you is what your hands have earned.
See, that's the part that sounds like victim blaming. You sinned, so your house got crushed. If I went and said that to a mother who just lost her child, I'm a monster.
And you would be. But the expert analysis in the source nuances this heavily. It says this isn't necessarily about individual blame for every specific victim in every single case. It is often about collective or societal consequence.
Structural sin, I've heard that term.
Yes, structural sin. Let's go back to our earthquake example. Imagine two cities, side by side. The exact same magnitude earthquake hits both of them. City A has rigorous building codes, enforces them without corruption, and hires engineers who actually did their job. City B has politicians who took bribes to let contractors use cheap concrete and cut corners on rebar.
In City A, the buildings sway, but they stand. People are scared, but they're alive. In City B, the buildings they pancake.
Exactly. The geological event, the act of God, was precisely the same for both cities. But the scale of the suffering was entirely man-made. The source argues that when communities abandon righteousness, and by righteousness the source includes justice, fair business, good infrastructure, care for the poor, scientific diligence, they weaken the fragile structures of their own society.
So God provided the gravity and the physics of the earthquake. We provided the bad concrete.
That's a perfect way to put it. The disaster doesn't create the cracks in society. It reveals the cracks that were already there. The cosmic audit records these collective failures. It exposes our greed, our laziness, our negligence.
So it's like the earthquake is just the final auditor coming in to check the books. The actual embezzlement and mismanagement happened years ago.
Exactly right. And there is another layer to this audit, what the source calls the here and now audit.
The here and now audit, what's that?
The test isn't just for the victims who were in the building. It is for the observers. It is for us sitting here watching it on the news.
Right.
When the tsunami hits, what do? That is the question being asked by the event itself. Do you despair? Do you shake your fist at the sky and write an angry blog post about how God must be evil? Or do you build systems of mercy? Do you donate? Do you send aid? Do you work to improve the early warning systems and the building codes for next time?
So the friction, the suffering, is the engine that drives human evolution. Not just biologically, but morally. It forces us to give a damn about each other.
The source argues that this friction is the only thing that really moves us forward. Without the threat of the storm, we would never have learned to build a shelter. Without the reality of hunger, we would never have developed agriculture or, for that matter, charity.
It's a tough pill to swallow, though. To say that my moral growth requires someone else's suffering, that feels, I don't know, parasitic.
It is if you assume this life is the end of the story. If the fawn dies and that's it, the screen goes black, then it's just a tragedy. If the child dies in the rubble and that's it, then it's just unthinkably cruel.
And this leads us to the final section, the promise of restoration. Because without this piece, the whole logical structure just falls apart, the math doesn't work.
The rationalist view relies completely on the fact that the Dunya, this world, is finite. The atheist's cry that we started with usually assumes that this life is the totality of existence. And if this is all there is, then yes, the suffering is unbearable and the injustice is absolute.
But the believer's hope, as the source calls it, is based on a timeline that stretches into the infinite.
Correct. The source details the promise of redemption. Again, from Surah Al-Qamar, the righteous will be among gardens and rivers.
We hear those terms a lot in religious texts. Gardens, rivers. It can sound a little cliche after a while, you know?
Sure. So let's strip away the cliche. Think about what they represent symbolically, especially in a desert context or in a world of scarcity and struggle. They represent a state of achieved perfection, a state with a lack of want, a lack of struggle. The source argues that this world is the process of achieving that state. It's the journey, not the destination.
And the suffering, the pain we felt at the beginning of this deep dive, where does that fit in?
The source uses a very old, very powerful metaphor. The refining of gold. You cannot purify gold without fire. You have to melt it down to its liquid state to get the impurities, the dross, to rise to the surface so they can be scraped away. The suffering is described as that fire. It reveals the true essence of a person's faith and character.
So the idea is the child who suffered in the earthquake or the innocent person who died, their story isn't over. They move to the next room and the accounting continues.
It's far from over.
Yeah.
The source claims that for the righteous, justice will ultimately reign. It uses the phrase, in a seat of honor near an omnipotent king. The argument is that the annihilated legions of the past, all the tragedies of history, they serve as data points in the final audit. No good deed is lost. No pain is unrecorded or forgotten.
Annihilated legions. That's a heavy phrase.
It refers to those civilizations that were wiped out, that seem to be just footnotes in a history book. The source says their history is preserved as a lesson. Actions have permanent records. The ultimate justice, in this view, is what balances the scales that seem so terribly unbalanced here and now.
So if we look at the ledger for this life only, the numbers just don't add up. It looks like the universe is running at a massive moral deficit.
Right. It looks like a complete and total loss.
But if you extend the timeline to infinity, the rationalist argues that the math eventually balances out.
That is the core of the argument. You cannot judge the justice or the meaning of a movie by a single freeze frame in the middle of the second act, especially if you pause it on the scene where the hero is getting beaten up.
Yeah.
You have to watch the whole film.
Okay, let's try to recap this whole journey, because we've covered a lot of ground. We started with the physical rumble of the ground, the sheer terror of the tsunami, and that primal atheist's cry that asks why.
We moved through the empiricist's indictment, the seeming randomness and cruelty of it all, the trilemma of the three omnis.
Then we had to shift our whole perspective to the sovereign intelligence, this idea that the universe is a clockwork mechanism of due measure. We realized that earthquakes are the price we pay for a magnetic field. We looked at the Fawn and considered that what looks like cruelty might be a form of ecological mercy.
Then we redefined the world, not as a waiting room, not as a lounge, but as a gymnasium, a crucible, a place where friction creates growth, where muscle is built through the process of tearing.
And we looked at the human variable, how disasters reveal our own structural sins, our bad concrete, and how they test our reaction as observers.
And finally, we landed on the promise of restoration, the idea that the story is much, much longer than we think, that the audit isn't closed until the end of time itself.
It's a lot. It doesn't necessarily take away the sting of the pain when you see it. I mean, when I turn on the news tonight and see a story about a flood or a fire, I'm still going to feel that ache in my chest.
It isn't meant to take away the sting. I don't think any argument can. It is meant to give the sting meaning.
Meaning. That's the key word, isn't it?
The source calls this whole process a metabolic moral health check.
A metabolic moral health check. I like that image. It's like the universe is taking our pulse.
It suggests that the world is a living, breathing, dynamic system. And the cosmic audit concludes that this system is designed for friction, for growth, and eventually for judgment.
So the suffering isn't a bug in the code.
No. According to this view, it is the feature. It is the core feature that allows for the existence of free will, moral development, science, and even love.
It's a heavy realization, but it leaves me with this one final thought, and I just want to throw this out to you listening right now. We talked about the stress test. We talked about how resistance builds muscle.
Go on.
If the world was perfect, if it was completely pain-free, if there were no lions, no earthquakes, no hunger, no struggle at all, would you actually be you?
That is the question, isn't it?
Or would you just be some kind of stagnant biological entity with a full belly and an empty mind? Would you have any need for love, for courage, for intellect, for compassion?
Perhaps the flaws we see in the design are the only things allowing us to exist as conscious, complex, striving beings in the first place.
Maybe the cracks are where the light gets in. Or maybe the cracks are what force us to learn how to build our own light. It's something to think about the next time the ground shakes, whether it's metaphorically or literally.
Indeed.
Thanks for taking this deep dive with us.
It was a pleasure.
We'll see you next time.